Hi everyone, welcome to Concept in Medicine. Today we are going to be looking at the anatomy of the anal canal. Let's begin. So first of all, you should know that the anal canal is the terminal segment of the gastrointestinal tract. So if you look at the anal canal here, as you can see, it is the final segment, the terminal segment of the gastrointestinal tract. And we will also say that the anal canal, with regards to its position, that the anal canal is located within the anal triangle of the perineum between the right and left ischio-anal foci. So once again, you should know that the anal canal is located within the anal triangle of the perineum between the right and left ischio-anal foci. Now look at the ischio-anal foci. This from all the way down here is the ischio-anal foci. So this becomes the left ischio-anal foci. And this becomes the right ischio-anal foci. So we are saying that the anal canal is located within the anal triangle of the perineum between the right and left ischio-anal foci. Okay, you should also know that the anal canal plays a significant role in defecation and also maintaining fecal continence, meaning that without the anal canal, you can just be walking and having fecal incontinence, where the fecal material will be left out through the anal canal. Meaning that if you look at the anal canal, you will notice that the anal canal has sphincters. That is the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. And these two sphincters, they contribute massively to defecation. As we progress in this tutorial, we will get to know the structure of the sphincters and also which kind of function or role they play. So the anal canal plays a significant role in defecation and the maintenance of fecal continence. Now, let's proceed again. One thing you have to know again is that the anal canal, in the exception of defecation, is collapsed by the internal and the external anal sphincters to prevent the passage of fecal material. And that is how the anal canal ensures that there is no fecal incontinence. I hope you get that. Okay, let's move on. Another thing we should take into consideration is the structure of the anal canal. So first of all, let's run through the drawing that I made on the board. If you look at this very carefully, you will realize that from the top here you have a ring, and that ring we call it the anorectal ring. And the anorectal ring, take into consideration or take note that the anorectal ring is a muscular ring. And once we are saying that it's a muscular ring, then we should be asking ourselves which muscles contribute to the ring. So you should know that the muscular ring here, known as the anorectal ring, is at the junction of the rectum and the anal canal. And it is made by the confluence or the fusion of three muscles. Which muscles? The internal anal sphincter, the external anal sphincter, and the puborectalis. When they are fused at the junction of the anal canal and the rectum, they form a muscular ring known as the anorectal ring. And it's the anorectal ring that separates the rectum from the anal canal. Now, if you go below the anorectal ring, you will find the anal canal. So in that scenario, we will say that the anorectal ring is what separates the rectum from the anal canal. Now, if you look at the anal canal critically, you will notice that the anal canal is divided into two parts by What exactly? By this structure here. And this structure has a name. It has a name. But first of all, let's delve in and we'll get to know the name. So another thing you should know is that if you watch the rectum is lined by a simple columnar epithelium. And if you look at the anal canal begins as a continuation of the rectum, because look, the anorectal ring is what separates it from the rectum. So the anal canals we are talking about begins as a continuation of the rectum, passes infero-posteriorly. It passes down and backwards to terminate where? At the anus. So let me take that again. The anal canal begins as a continuation of the rectum, passes downwards and backwards. That is infero-posteriorly to terminate where? At the anus. Okay? Now, if you look at the rectum, as I initially said, it is lined by simple columnar epithelium. And if you watch the anal canal, you realize that the superior aspect of the anal canal also has the same epithelium as the rectum, and that is going to be the simple columnar epithelium. Now, if you look at the superior aspect of the anal canal, the mucosa, that's the anal mucosa, is organized into longitudinal folds known as the anal columns of Morgagni. That is what I labeled here. So you can see the columns. So if you say columns, it's going to be like this. So this becomes a column. 1, 2, 3. This is a column. We call this the anal column of Morgagni. 1, 2, 3. Anal columns of Morgagni. And these anal columns, if you go to the inferior aspect, they are left open, but they are going to be closed by another structure. The inferior ends of the anal columns are covered by what we call the anal valves. The anal valves. So these are the anal valves. As you can see here, the anal valves are here. As I labeled here, these are the anal valves here, down there. But the column are the longitudinal structures, the longitudinal folds. Now, again, you will notice that the anal valves contains what we call the anal sinuses. They contain the anal sinuses. And these anal sinuses contain glands. So these are the anal sinuses, the dot that we are seeing. They are the anal sinuses. And within the anal sinuses are glands. And these glands, what do? They secrete mucus. They secrete mucus. Now, the anal valves, once again, form irregular circles known as the pectinate line. So the dash you are seeing here is what we call pectinate line, or another name for it is the dentate line. We can also call it the squamo-columnar junction. Why it is called the squamo-columnar junction, we will get to know as we delve deeper. Now, you should know that this pectinate line or the dentate line divides the anal canal into two parts. 1, 2. And it divides into two parts, namely the upper anal canal and the lower anal canal. So if you observe very well, you will notice that the upper anal canal is located above the dentate line or the pectinate line, and the lower anal canal is located below the dentate or pectinate line. And again, if you observe, you realize that the upper anal canal is longer than the lower anal canal. The upper anal canal constitutes about 2/3 of the anal canal, whilst the lower anal canal constitutes about 1/3 of the anal canal. Now, if you look at the upper anal canal and the lower anal canal, you will notice that the lower anal canal at the level of the intersphincteric groove. What am I calling intersphincteric groove? If you look here, we have what we call the internal anal sphincter, and outside you have the external anal sphincter. And if you observe very carefully, you will notice that both sphincters do not end at the same point. You will notice that the external anal sphincter goes down more than what? The internal anal sphincter. Likewise, the internal anal sphincter goes above the external anal sphincter. And between them, we are going to have a groove. So this groove here is what we call the intersphincteric groove. And at the level of the intersphincteric groove, there is a white line we call the Hilton's line. So the Hilton's line is at the level of the intersphincteric groove. And this Hilton's line further divides the lower anal canal into two parts. That will be the superior aspect of the lower anal canal and the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal. So that becomes the superior aspect and the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal. Now, let's talk about the upper anal canal and the lower anal canal. So let's talk about the upper and the lower anal canal. If we take the upper anal canal embryologically, you will realize that the upper anal canal is derived from the embryonic hindgut, whilst the lower anal canal is derived from the ectoderm of the proctodium. And when we say proctodium, take the word procto. Procto means rectum, right? In embryology, the proctodium refers to what? A primordial anus, which later develops to form the anal canal, especially the lower aspect of the anal canal. Okay, the proctodium is a primordial anus, which will develop later to form the lower anal canal. And there's something in embryology we also call the stomodium. For the stomodium, it refers to the primordial mouth. The stomodium, so the stomodium refers to what? The primordial mouth, while the proctodium refers to the primordial anus. Okay? Another thing you should know is that the upper anal canal is lined by simple columnar epithelium. Why? Because it is continuous with the rectum. They share the same epithelium. And the lower anal canal is lined by the stratified squamous epithelium. Okay, now let's talk about the lower anal canal. So for the lower anal canal, as initially mentioned, we know that at the level of the intersphincteric groove, the Hilton's line, that's a white line, separates the lower anal canal into the superior aspect and the inferior aspect. And you should know that the superior aspect of the lower anal canal, which is immediately below the dentate or the pectinate line, is lined by non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. But if you take the inferior aspect, which is here, of the lower anal canal, it is lined by keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. And again, I told you there's a reason why the pectinate line is also known as the squamocolumnar junction. The reason being that if you take the upper anal canal, it is lined by simple columnar epithelium for the fact that it is continuous with the rectum. And they share the same what? Epithelium. And if you come to the lower anal canal, it is lined by the squamous epithelium. So if you take squamo, it's going to come from where? The lower anal canal. Columnar is going to come from the upper anal canal. And their meeting point becomes what? The junction. And because of that, we refer to that as what? Squamocolumnar junction. I hope you got that. Let's move on. You should know that if you come to the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal, you will notice that it transits into the perianal skin, the anal skin. And if you watch very carefully, that junction of transition, that junction at which it transits from the mucosa of the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal into the anal skin or the perianal skin, we refer to that as the anal verge. So the anal verge is the transition zone, the keratinized stratified squamous epithelium into the anal skin. And there's a difference between the epithelium of the anal skin and the epithelium of the lower anal canal. That's with regards to the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal. So the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal is lined by keratinized stratified squamous epithelium without skin appendages. And what are the skin appendages? The skin appendages are the hairs, the sebaceous gland, and the sweat gland. The keratinized stratified squamous epithelium of the inferior aspect of the lower anal canal lacks the skin appendages, the hairs, the sweat gland, sebaceous glands. But if you take the epithelium of the anal skin, they have the skin appendages, meaning that the epithelium of the anal skin is going to be described as a keratinized stratified squamous epithelium with skin appendages. I hope that makes sense to you. Okay, let's move on. Now the next thing we want to talk about is the anal sphincters. So talking about the anal sphincter complex, we are looking at the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. Now, if you take the internal anal sphincter, you will notice that the internal anal sphincter surrounds the upper two-thirds of the anal canal. And again, if you look at the external anal sphincter, you realize that it surrounds the lower two-thirds of the anal canal, hence overlapping with the internal anal sphincter. So if you watch very carefully, you realize that the anal sphincters are not at the same level. The external anal sphincter is lower than the internal anal sphincter, and vice versa. That is, the internal anal sphincter is higher than the external anal sphincter. That is why we are saying the internal anal sphincter covers or surrounds at the upper two-thirds of the anal canal, whilst the external anal sphincter surrounds the lower two-thirds of the anal canal. Another thing you should know is that the internal anal canal is formed from a thickening of the involuntary circular smooth muscles in the wall of the bowel. So how do you know that it's involuntary? Internal, the in here, and the in the involuntary. So that is the trick. So the internal for involuntary. I hope you get that. So it's an involuntary muscle formed from a thickening of the involuntary circular smooth muscle in the wall of the bowel. But if you take the external anal sphincter, it is a voluntary muscle. Then again, if you look at the internal anal sphincter, it is continuous with the rectus muscularis propria. It's lying above the internal anal sphincter. And if you take the external anal sphincter, it is continuous with the puborectalis, which is it forms a medial aspect of the pelvic floor. And which muscles make up the pelvic floor? You should always remember the levator ani muscle and the coccygeus muscle. But the levator ani muscle is made up of three muscles. What are they? The buborectalis, which is a medial group, the bubococcygeus, another medial group, and the lateral aspect, you are going to have the iliococcygeus. I hope you should also know that the anal canal, in general, is 4 centimeters in length. That is averagely. Averagely, the anal canal is 4 centimeters in length. It is 4 centimeters in length. But if you look at the range, it could vary from 3 centimeters to 5 centimeters, and averagely 4 centimeters in length. Let's move on to the neurovascular supply of the anal canal. Okay, so let's talk about the differences in the neurovascular supply of the upper anal canal and the lower anal canal. Or in another way, the region above the dentate line, that's the pectinate line, and the region below the pectinate line. So if you take the upper anal canal with regards to the arterial supply, the upper anal canal, that's the region above the pectinate line or the dentate line, is supplied by the superior rectal artery. And you should know that the superior rectal artery is a branch of the inferior mesenteric artery. And you should know that the inferior mesenteric artery itself is a branch of the abdominal aorta. It's one of the most prominent anterior divisions of the abdominal aorta. Take note that there are three prominent anterior branches of the abdominal aorta. And what are these branches? We have the inferior mesenteric artery, which we have there, the superior mesenteric artery, and finally the celiac trunk. Those are the three main anterior branches of the abdominal aorta. The inferior mesenteric artery is coming from where? The abdominal aorta, and it gives off the branch superior rectal artery, which then supplies the upper anal canal. You should know that the upper anal canal is not only supplied by the superior rectal artery, it is also supplied by the anastomosing branches of the middle rectal artery. Now, if you take the lower anal canal, the lower anal canal is supplied by the inferior rectal artery. And the inferior rectal artery is a branch of the internal pudendal artery. And the internal pudendal artery, where does it come from? It is coming from the internal iliac artery. I hope you've gotten that. And also, the lower anal canal is supplied by the anastomosing arteries or the anastomosing branches of the middle rectal artery. That goes for the arterial supply of the upper anal canal and the lower anal canal. Now, let's look at the venous drainage. The venous drainage is going to have a similar route, just that the name will change to vein. So the upper anal canal is drained by the superior rectal vein, which further empties into the inferior mesenteric vein, and the inferior mesenteric vein will empty into the portal venous system. You should know that the portal vein is made up of the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein. And the inferior mesenteric vein empties into the splenic vein. That is why we are saying that the drainage will form part of the portal venous system. Now, if we take the venous drainage of the lower anal canal, it is drained by the inferior rectal vein, which then empties into the internal pudendal vein, which then also empties into the internal iliac vein, and making up the what? The systemic venous return, or the systemic venous system. Because at the end of the day, they are going to go into the inferior vena cava. So that makes it for the venous drainage of the anal canal. Now let's move on to the nerve supply. The upper anal canal receives visceral innervation from where? Via the inferior hypogastric plexus. And this visceral innervation makes it only sensitive to stretch. Please take note of that. This is a concept, high-yield concept. It is only sensitive to what? Stretch. And if you want to apply this, then you can go into the world of hemorrhoids. And if you are talking about hemorrhoids, based on the relation to the pectinate or the dentate line, we have the internal hemorrhoids and the external hemorrhoids. If you are above the pectinate line, we call you the internal hemorrhoids. If you are below the pectinate line, we call you the external hemorrhoids. And if you watch closely, the internal hemorrhoids are usually not painful. The internal pathological hemorrhoids, they are usually not painful. Why? Because they have visceral innervation, which is only sensitive to stretch. So that is the application that we are talking about. But if you look at the external hemorrhoids, they have the somatic innervation because they are located where? Below the pectinate line. So they will be sensitive to, pain, pressure, temperature, and touch. That is why they will be painful. The same thing applies here. If you look at the lower anal canal, they have somatic innervation from where? The inferior rectal nerves, which are branches of the pudendal nerve. And as such, they are sensitive to pain, pressure, temperature, and touch, just like we applied in the world of pathological hemorrhoids. Now, finally, the lymphatic drainage. The upper anal canal is drained by the internal iliac lymph nodes, whilst the lower anal canal is drained by the superficial inguinal lymph nodes. And I hope this is interesting to you. You might want to take note of this, future references. Now, the last thing we want to look at is the anatomical relation of the anal canal to other structures. Now, let's finally conclude with the anatomical relations of the anal canal. Which structures does the anal canal relate to? And in this aspect, we are going to be looking at anteriorly, posteriorly, and laterally to the sides. Now, if we take the anteriorly, it's going to differ in males and females, unlike the rest, which are going to be the same. So if we take the males, anteriorly, you have the anal canal having a relationship with the perineal body, the urogenital diaphragm, the urethra, and the bulb of the penis. But if you go to the females, you have the perineal body, the urogenital diaphragm, and the vagina. Now, posteriorly, which structures do you have there in relation to the anal canal? In the posterior aspect, you will see the coccyx, the sacrum, and also the anal-soccygeal ligament. Then laterally, what are you going to see? The ischio-anal foci. Remember we said that the anal canal is located within the anal triangle of the perineal body. Remember that we said that the anal canal is located within the anal triangle of the perineum between the right and left ischio-anal foci. And the right and the left ischio-anal foci, they'll be relating to the anal canal from the side or laterally. I hope the anatomy of the anal canal made a lot of sense to you and very interesting to you as well. Kindly make sure to subscribe to my channel, comment in the commentary box with regards to questions that you may want to ask, and also with regards to the next concept you would like to see on my channel. And please like also and share to keep the channel running. And once again, this is Concept in Medicine. Bye-bye.